all Autobots. Calling all Autobots.
Whoa! Oh my god!
So Transformers 1 is the newest movie in the Transformers franchise. We've had a couple live action movies for a while, but it's time we actually went back to animated mode. It tells the story of Orion Pax and D16 before they were Optimus Prime and Megatron. They're just basic minor bots working to help regain Cybertron back to his truest form until they discover a certain truth that feels like, oh, we have to do something about it, and unlocking certain abilities that makes them more than meets the eye. That's all I can say because I got an early access to go see this thing, and I'm not gonna do a spoiler review just yet because I have a feeling that okay, I enjoyed it for the first time I watched it, but there's a lot in here I have to unpack because for me, if I'm being honest with you, going into this thing, looking at the trailers, looking at everything I've seen for this movie so far, I thought, okay, we're going back to animated movie again, and I feel like this isn't gonna be for me. The animation looked a bit weird, where it's like, okay, this looks like it's made for kids. It doesn't look like it's for the age demographic that I grew up with. I grew up with Transformers, but I'll go check it out. I like Transformers, and boy, was I dumbfounded. Everything you've seen in these trailers, they're just showing little bits and pieces of the movie for what they want to represent. Because yeah, the trailers show a comedic tone where it's like, oh, you're seeing Optimus make jokes, you're seeing Bumblebee be the standout, when it's really supposed to be the origin of Optimus and Megatron, where it's like, okay, I want to see that whole friends to enemies thing unfolds, but I have a feeling that the trailers aren't doing a good job with it, but boy, this movie says otherwise. If you're a diehard Transformers fan, hopefully enough you get a couple of the references in this movie because this is a true basic Transformers film where I feel like, okay, all the Michael Bay movies, they try to do their own thing with the lore. They dicked with it for the most part and at least changed a couple things where it's like, it's not supposed to be this way. They did try fixing it with Bumblebee and Rise of the Beast, but I have a feeling that back to its animated roots, Transformers 1 actually do its justice in actually being a Transformers movie first, focusing on the Autobots, developing the characters, and actually showing the reasons to why we should actually care about these guys. And there are a couple standouts in this film because for the one time I actually can say Megatron, played by Brian Tyree Henry, he is the best part and the emotional center of this whole thing. We've seen Megatron in the live action film just be angry for the sake of being angry and villain just for being villain. And in this film, you see him as a tragic character where he's just doing his job. And once he discovers a certain element of truth where it's like, oh, this is what really happened to us, this is what really happened to me. And it takes it personal because I have a feeling that, okay, most of the animated people who know this stuff actually seen the cartoons. Priority of Transformers Prime actually showed a bit of the elements of Megatron's past, but this showed off in a way where it's like, no, he's valid, he has a good reason for it. And I'm getting to that point where I have a feeling that every movie where I see where it's a good guy and a villain from an old school 80s or 90s property, I have a feeling that I shouldn't be siding with them. But then again, I'm like, he's not wrong in it. Keegan Michael Key was a standout as Bumblebee, and not gonna lie, he had the most comedic dialogue out of everybody in this film. And I can't believe, I don't even know if it's 100% of his dialogue is ad lib because some moments in this movie I'm like, okay, you're just saying the repeating line because I've seen it in the trailers. But then he comes up with some other stuff where I have a feeling like, okay, either this is acknowledgement of the franchise as a whole, or you're just making stuff on the fly and it's like, I can't deny that it's true. He even does a Key and Peele reference where it's like, barely anybody in my theater laughed except me because I caught what the reference was. But I'm like, Toy Story 4 and now here. Key and Peele should come back at some point. Chris Hemsworth as Orion Pax or Optimus Prime. I gotta say, I kind of felt like I knew I wasn't gonna like his portrayal of Optimus because his voice is not exactly on par with Peter Cullen. Because I have a feeling that once Peter Cullen dies, that's gonna be like the ultimate Optimus voice forever. He doesn't do too much of a copycat voice in him. He does a bit of his own personal voice, and you can hear it throughout the movie. Where from the beginning you hear his regular voice, and then right during the second and third act, his voice slowly evolves and changes. It doesn't try to be an impersonation, but for the most part, at least he's doing his own voice and his own mannerisms to actually being the leader everybody knows him to be. And for the most part, I like the fact that this is mainly taking place on Cybertron, something we haven't seen just yet in the movies. I know we've seen it for the intro of Dark of the Moon, and we saw it for the full 10 minutes of Bumblebee, and I have a feeling that yeah, they did say they could have done this in live action, but that would cost a lot of money. But I'm like, bullshit. This could have been live action for the most part, but I have a feeling that, yeah, animation has its time taking you to a whole different world, showing you a new perspective you haven't seen just yet in the movies. But I have a feeling that, yeah, animated wise, the animation looks good. Some of it reminds me of Transformers Prime, but in a 3D style. But I have a feeling that, yeah, in this movie, most of the characters look like toys, and I can't lie in saying that they did originate from toys. Even the way they transform, because they actually have their pieces going inside them, and they can actually move within mechanisms to actually fight each other. My one flaw with this film is that the fact that, yeah, it's going to be repeated over and over, and I don't even know if I'm going to be the only one who acknowledges it. But the first act of this film, it took a little bit to get going since we're dealing with some of the kiddie nonsense, because I have a feeling that, yes, we're going to have to see Orion and D16 actually try to do their thing as minor bots before they actually get into actually being the characters we know. And I'm like, yeah, but part of this is not on par with the characters how I actually saw them in other stuff. Like, I don't want to see a young Optimus quipping jokes, acting a bit like Nathan Drake going on adventures, because I have a feeling that that comparison is the one I can actually say, because he's cocky at times. He actually feels like he's better than everybody, including the fact that he's like, nah, don't worry about it, D16, you got this. It's like, I don't want quippy Optimus. I thought I actually see Orion Pax as the wise, oh, I'm just not willing to do this thing, but I have a feeling I'm put on this path to where I actually have to step up. But the movie doesn't actually try to acknowledge that until around the second act. From the second act on, that becomes a whole different movie where the tonal shift changes, where the movie cuts black, and then once it goes back, that rhymed for no reason. The movie itself actually turns to a full-on Transformers movie, and I can't lie and say, why couldn't the movie just start here, cut out a bit of the kiddie stuff, and actually make a full-blown mature animated Transformers film? I know they're trying to aim at new audiences for this thing, and not gonna lie, the screening I went to had mainly adults rather than kids. But I kind of miss the fact that kids' movies nowadays have to do the thing where they have to aim at kids, but then be for adults second. I don't like that as much, but I have a feeling that, yeah, this is sort of the little steps you have to take to where actually acknowledge these characters, where it's like, yeah, that's character development, but then again, it's like, why couldn't you have them be wise characters at first? So like that, once you see all the stuff happen in this film and actually them go on their journey, they could actually be, oh, you know what? We could actually think about what we've done here. So like that, we could actually try to better ourselves for the rest of the movie. Minor nitpick aside, the action in this thing, that's what the real highlight of this thing. I know we've seen live action Transformers and what they can do. Mainly Rise of the Beast showed what you can really do with full on fledged CGI instead of having to deal with certain elements of cities being destroyed and actually using some designs, and where I can feel like, okay, I don't know whether or not this is supposed to be a truck or a car, where you don't see the designs for what they are and you just see robots on robots. They take fully advantage of the transformation sequence in this, and I have a feeling that, yeah, this is Gen 1 animation, so I gotta have a feeling that whenever we get into the next one, we're gonna see full-on redesigns, and every Transformer we've already seen in the previous films or in the cartoons could actually have a highlight in this. All I can say is that I had a good time with it. Yeah, it's a bit childish in the beginning, but once the movie actually gets going, that's a real full-on Transformers film. And I can't lie and say that, you know what? Transformers, it should be for adults. But then again, it's like, yeah, there's a whole new generation who don't know about Transformers. And it's sad when I have to ask certain people, I'm like, hey, do you want to go see Transformers? And they tell me, no, I don't like Transformers. And I'm like, why? It's just, they're not into it. I'm like, yeesh, we're getting to that point. I get the target audience it's aimed for, but hopefully, right after the response with this, they could try to actually improve it for the sequel, because we've seen what they've done with Spider-Verse, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and for the most part, Puss in Boots, which, who would have thought? These guys had to start somewhere, and hopefully enough with the sequel, they could actually try to do a lot more than meets the eye. I had a good time with this, and hopefully you do too on day one of release. Alright guys, thank you guys for watching. Leave a like, subscribe if you haven't already. All my social media is down in the description below, and I'll see you guys next time. Roll out!